absolutely nobody is going to believe me the next time that I say I had a terrible reading month, because I have been complaining about how awful March has been for reading the entire month. And I just looked and I read 11 books, and that's not bad at all, actually. Hey y'all, it's Sam. Welcome back to my channel, and we are talking about all of the books that I read in March. I kept complaining about how awful March was, and it really truly did feel like an awful reading month, even though I read a lot of books that I liked, and I did read 11 books. I only read for like the first half of the month, and then I read one book like a couple days ago, and that was it. Like, there was a good almost 2-week span in the middle there where I did not touch a book at all, and I think that's why it felt like such a rough month. But in actuality, it really wasn't that bad, and I did still get some reading done. I did still read some really amazing books, and I definitely did not finish my TBR. I just completely ignored the last 3 books on it. And I'm not sorry about it, honestly, because I was not in the mood for those, and we do not force ourselves to read books that we're not in the mood for here. That is not a thing that we do. For the month of March, I read 11 books and 4,582 pages, which is my lowest page count and my lowest number of books, but not by much. February I read 13, but I managed to read like an extra 2,000, almost 3,000 pages. So I think that's why March felt so different. I also listened to quite a few audiobooks in March, which is pretty rare for me. So March was just an interesting month, honestly, and I am gonna stop complaining about it now, I promise. For March, I did have an average rating of 4.36, which is a little bit lower than February, but still doing pretty good. We didn't really have any books in there that were 2 or 3 stars. We had mostly like 4 and 5. So I also had 3 rereads, and one of those rereads I'm positive is the only reason I do not still feel like I'm in a reading slump, because sometimes I just feel like a reread, especially this reread, just pops me right back into the reading world. So if you're curious, our genre breakdown for March, we had 5 fantasy novels, 1 graphic novel, 1 magical realism, 1 romance, and 2 thrillers. Oh, and 1 nonfiction. So I did read 1 audiobook. I actually started like 3 others but didn't finish any of them, and they were all nonfiction, so I feel like by telling you about one of them, it's going to kind of encompass the whole subject that I was researching at the time. One thing that does not surprise me at all anymore is the age breakdown. I read 6 adult books, 2 new adult, and 3 young adult books. So I'm definitely seeing a major shift away from young adult literature and into more adult, and I'm kind of excited about this transition. A little bit nervous because I do like fantasy so much, and adult fantasy can be really intimidating, but I'm really excited to kind of start delving into that genre, and I do have some plans to do that next month. If you want to see what I'm going to read in April or what I was supposed to read in March, I will link both my March TBR game and my April TBR game below, as well as a link to the readathon that I am participating in April. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and we're going to jump into all of the books that I read in March. The first book that I read in March was House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. I technically started this at the end of February, on like the very last day of the month, but I finished it on March 2nd, and it was incredible. This is the 2nd book in her Crescent City series, and it just took everything I loved about the first book and ran with it. The ending absolutely destroyed me, and I am just so excited for the series to continue. This is one of those series where I really felt like the first book could have and almost should have been a standalone. I loved everything about the first book. It very quickly made one of my favorite books of all time, and I just really wanted the story to end there because I was so happy at the end of the first book. But there were some loose ties that had not been tied up yet, so we have a 2nd book, and it was so good. It looks so much longer, but it's actually almost exactly the same length as the first book, and all I can really talk about with, like, I can't talk about any of it without giving it away, but the flippin' ending, guys. Everybody talks about the ending, and every single theory that I had for what could possibly be causing this much chaos at the end of a book, I was wrong. Every single theory I had, I was wrong. And I'm really glad that I was, because I loved the ending of this book. I mean, I'm stressed about the ending of the book, but I am so ready for the 3rd book. If you have not read this series or heard of it yet, which I feel like most people have heard about it, but not everybody knows what it's about. This is an adult fantasy set in like an urban city setting in a magical world, and our main character Bryce is like a party girl and her best friend is murdered by a demon. Bryce ends up at the center of the investigation and she's working alongside Hunt Athalar, who is a fallen angel, and he has been kind of enslaved by the other angels that he once rebelled against, and they have to work together to figure out who is murdering people and what is happening and all of this different stuff. The first book is so incredible. It's like a high fantasy, urban setting, thriller, romance. Like that, it encompasses so many different genres, and I just absolutely loved that about it. And the second book was just as good. Like I really, really love this series. It is one of my favorite adult fantasies, and I am so excited for the next book. The next book I read is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. This follows a bunch of different points of views, but basically we have this young couple who are 19 years old. They have a 1-year-old son, and they go on their first date night since the baby was born, and they do not come back. So we've got multiple points of view. We have Tallulah, the girl, before she disappears. We have her mom's point of view right after she disappears. We have Sophie, who is a semi-connected character to the rest of the story about a year after the disappearances have happened, and all of these timelines are kind of interwoven throughout the story while the mystery unfolds. I totally lied when I said I didn't give any books bad ratings. I gave this book 2 stars and then absolutely forgot, and honestly the biggest reason is that it was completely unmemorable. I was really disappointed by this book, to be honest. It was okay, and I did finish it, and I do think that this book might have led to a lot of my reading slump later on in the month, especially around thrillers. I found that there were too many different points of view and different timelines running at the same time that it just became very disjointed, and sometimes it was a little bit confusing, but that wasn't my biggest issue. It was mostly just by the time I was starting to get invested in the story, it would switch timelines and points of view again, and then I would be completely in a different spot and I couldn't get invested in anything. I also felt like the actual mystery wasn't that mysterious. I mean, there were definitely like some twists and turns and things, but I didn't feel like I was all that invested in what had happened to this couple, and I didn't feel like the plot was progressing very quickly at all. It felt like we had just like a lot of nothing until like the last few chapters when everything kind of wrapped up. So all in all, this was not my favorite Lisa Jewell book, and I do like Lisa Jewell as an author, so I do absolutely plan to read other books that she has read. I have really liked some of her other books. This one just didn't do it for me. The next book I read in March, I actually have recently loaned to a friend, so I will put it up here, and that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This book follows coworkers who are total enemies. They absolutely hate each other. They are both assistants to publishers. It's like two publishing companies that have merged, and they were the assistants to the original CEOs that are now co-CEOs, and they are both up for the same promotion. So total workplace enemies to lovers, some really great banter. Like this is one of my favorite books for like rom-com banter enemies type of thing. Like they really get into it at the beginning of the book, and I really liked that part. And I found the romance really fun and really cute. I really liked both characters, and I really liked them together, even as enemies. Like I thought they were so cute when they were arguing all the time, and then they just got cuter as they fell in love with each other. Like it was very typical rom-com, but if you do like rom-coms, this is a pretty solid one. Next book I read is The Exile. This is the graphic novel for Outlander. It is very short. It only encompasses about the first third of the original book, and it's supposed to be like Jamie / Murtagh's point of view. It was kind of cool. I mean, it's an Outlander book, so like my heart wants to rate it 5 stars, but if I was actually like critically looking at it, which let's be honest, I absolutely am not, but if I were, it would probably be rated a little bit lower. I definitely felt like this is a book that you can only enjoy if you love the Outlander story. It definitely does not stand on its own. It doesn't work as its own story. It really doesn't even work as like a novella to the rest of the series. I don't really know how to explain that. It's missing a lot of things that I wished it had, and it only covers the first third of the first book. So the overarching like plot is just not there, but it was really cute. I did really like getting to see some interesting things from Jamie's point of view that we didn't know about, because the other books, at least the first book, follows almost entirely Claire's point of view, so you don't get to see all of the stuff that happens in this graphic novel from just reading the first book. So I definitely think it's a really great supplement to the series, and it definitely adds a little bit of intrigue to the first book. But as far as like graphic novels go, or as far as additions to a series go, maybe not the best. But I'm definitely still rating it 5 stars, because the day I rate something about Outlander less than 5 stars is the day they put me in the ground. And probably not even then. Next up, we have The Golden Couple. This is by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, and it was my book of the month pick for, I think, February. And this was a cute... It was not cute. This was a thriller. This was not cute. This was this was the opposite of cute. This was strange. Basically, this follows a couple whose marriage is in crisis, and they seek out this therapist who is known for her unorthodox methods, and she lost her license due to those methods, but she's known for being able to fix anybody's issue within 10 sessions. However, some of her methods, being very unorthodox, are a little bit strange, and there's definitely something off about every character in the book, and it all kind of ties together at the end. It was good, and I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. I liked the ending a lot. There were definitely things that I didn't see coming. I thought that the therapy methods were interesting, and I thought that the characters themselves were interesting. I thought that it was a very realistic depiction of a marriage in crisis in this capacity. And yeah, I mean, it was a solid thriller. Not my favorite thriller ever, but I did really like it. I gave it 4 stars, so it was good. Next up, I read A History of Wild Places. This is by Shay Earnshaw, and it was my book of the month pick for January. This is a magical realism kind of story about a bunch of people that go missing, kind of, sort of. So we have a children's author who writes like really dark children's literature, and she goes missing, and then I think like 5 years later, or maybe even longer, a man who has kind of like a power to find people, kind of like almost like a little bit of a magical power to kind of find missing people, goes in search of her, and then he also disappears. And then we jump to a separate character who is living in this very small, reclusive, culty type of community, and he finds a truck that belongs to the guy that disappeared, and so that you've got kind of this dual timeline mystery happening here. And yeah, I gave this book 3 stars. I liked it. I wish it had gone in a slightly different direction. I felt like there was a lot of things that at the beginning I was really invested in and really intrigued by, and then the actual direction that those things went in was slightly disappointing. It's not a bad book by any means. It's still really good, and I did really enjoy it. It's like a magical realism thriller, and it was really fun. I just wish that it had been a little bit more... I wish there were certain aspects of the beginning that had been explored at a deeper level, or that had been bigger, that had meant something more. That's kind of like, I had a direction that I was hoping it was going to go in, and it kind of almost did, but not quite. And I just wish that it had actually gone where I was hoping it was going. But all in all, it was still a good book. Like, I still really liked it. Then I read the Carnival Trilogy by Stephanie Garber. So I read all 3 books. I actually read all 3 books in like a day and a half, just like I did the first time I read the series. So obviously this is one of my favorite series. I did give them all 5 stars. Absolutely love the series. This series follows 2 sisters, Donatella and Scarlett, and they live on a little island with their abusive father. Their mother has died, and they have been dreaming their entire lives about going to Carnival, which is like a magical circus carnival mystery dinner game type of thing all rolled into one. And it's run by Legend, who is this mysterious magician basically. And they have been writing letters to him for years, begging him to bring Carnival to their island. And then finally they get an invite to the latest Carnival, and they have to sneak off of their island, But once they get there, absolutely nothing is as it seems. A lot of things are happening behind the scenes and they can't trust anybody or anything that they see. They can't even trust themselves. So it is such a fun series. It is such a fun fantasy romance. It's totally young adult. It's very cute, and I just absolutely fell in love with this story and how atmospheric and unique it is. And I love the circusy type of setting. I love the magical atmosphere. I love the romance. And if you like any of those things, read this book. Okay, so all of those books were read within the first 2 weeks. And then I read one audiobook. And I listened to this while sitting on my couch playing Animal Crossing, because I could not bring myself to read anything else. And then I kind of got a little bit invested in the topic, and that distracted me for a while. The book that I read was Messy Minimalism by Rochelle Crawford. This book is basically about a more realistic version of minimalism. Instead of being like only owning one plate and one fork per person, it's being minimal and decluttering without being extreme about it. And I have been drawn to minimalism for a very long time. Obviously not in every aspect. I'm never getting rid of these books, but in a lot of other ways, I do keep a fairly minimal wardrobe, but I find that a lot of minimalism can be very constricting and very numbers focused. Like, I don't have a certain number of items in my wardrobe, nor do I particularly want to, but it is a topic that I get really interested in a lot. I thought that this book was really good. It was really realistic and it was really helpful. The last book that I read in March, I did not think that I was gonna finish, and I finished it last night. Read the whole thing this weekend basically. Now I'm ready to read the rest of the series again, and I am absolutely ready to continue reading after this. It has finally broken my reading slump, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was my original BookTube book. This was the first book that I read when I first started thinking about joining BookTube, and specifically when I joined Bookstagram almost 2 years ago, and I still absolutely love this series. The first book, not so much, let's be honest, but I am so excited to read the rest of the series. I am buddy reading it with a friend, which is the only thing that got me to read anything the last week. So I'm really, really thankful that she is reading this with me. We've both read the series multiple times before, but we decided after we finished Outlander that we really needed something that was like a comfort read, and we really missed this world, so we jumped back in. And luckily, I'm reading the series at a time where I'm going to be doing a fantasy-based readathon, so the rest of the series will help me fill so many prompts for that readathon, and that is wonderful. So that is everything that I read in March. All in all, not a bad reading month, despite the fact that I really felt like it was a terrible reading month and didn't read anything for almost 2 weeks out of the month. It actually was a pretty good reading month, so we'll take what we can get, call it a win, and we're gonna do so much better in April. I'm so ready to love reading again. I took a little break. I'm ready to continue. So if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button so that y'all can see my next video. I do have my April TBR game that just came out. Next, I am hoping to do a reading vlog for some of the Realmathon books that I'm going to be reading this month. So make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the little bell icon so you can be notified of when I post that. And I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!